Okay, we are working in Inventor and we are looking at how to make an assembly with our IKEA toy set, and there's some unique types of things that are new to us that we need to learn. So here's an example that we made for PTO when we did the grant for this project. It's like a motorcycle, and if you take a look, there's a bunch of parts, but really the core part, I would argue, is this wood cube double right here. And you'll notice that when I hover over it, it has the pin symbol on it, and over here in the browser it has the pin, because when we brought that in, we right-clicked and pressed grounded. So if you bring in a couple parts to start with, I don't recommend bringing in this many, but just a couple. That first core part, have it lined up in your isometric view you want, right-click and make sure you click on grounded so that it is grounded and will not move. Then, as we go, let's take a look. Notice that I'm using these black connectors to connect this wood cube double to this wood cube double and this wood half cube. So what I might do is take these black connectors. Now, when I open up my constraint set, I no longer want to just use a simple mate. I want to use an insert constraint. The insert constraint, when I do an opposed insert constraint, will actually constrain a rotational axis and a face. So I'm going to constrain, you can see it's choosing an arrow and that circle. So I want that to be chosen. And then on these black connectors, I'm going to choose either this side or this side. If I choose this side, it'll flip it around. I'll choose that side. And watch what happens when I click on it. It will pop it in there. Okay? Now, if I hit OK, that'll close that, and it's been applied. The only thing left, it'll have 1 degree of freedom, which will simply be rotation around the axis about which we mated it. Also notice I mated the bottom of that little ledge so that it's on the top of the wood part. If I had accidentally chosen this part, it would have flipped it around. So it still rotates, and that's okay that that still rotates. Now let's go ahead and put a wood cube on top of it. So I would do constrain, again an insert constraint. I would keep it opposed, which just means that the axes don't line up with each other. And I'll choose this circle to go on to right there. Now I don't want to choose down here because then it would be going over the black connector, which it does not. I want to instead choose this spot right there. I hit OK. Now, the only thing that the wood block can do is, of course, rotate. And I'd like that to not rotate. 2 ways I could handle that. One, you might already be thinking about. I could, of course, do a flush constraint with this side and this side. Now, I'm going to hit cancel so that that doesn't happen. And instead, I'm going to show you a new type of constraint. I can do constrain, an angle constraint. So these are the 2 new types we have to learn. Insert for the holes and the pegs, and angle constraints to line things up. So for an angle constraint, I like to choose the 2 input directed angle, which is simply going to make the 2 faces you want have an angle that you choose, and we're typically going to keep it at 0 so that they are parallel to one another. So I'll choose my first input I will choose is this face, and then I'll choose this face, and since I set a 0 degree angle, it will keep them parallel to one another, and that's good. What's nice about this is now the part cannot move, but also they're lined up, and even if they weren't exactly flush, in other words, if it wasn't flat for some reason, they will stay parallel to each other. Now, as you see in our example, we begin to have these little plastic bar longs that can connect to the wheel on the front. So let me start putting those in. So again, quick and dirty insert constraints. Insert to insert. Now notice I flipped it all the way over here. That doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine. Insert. I can take this hole and I can go over around to this side. And I probably didn't even need to change my view and put it there. And I hit apply. Now, both of those are still rotating. If I want those to stop rotating, it's actually pretty simple to stop them from rotating. I can simply use an angle constraint. So I'll do angle constraint. I'll do a directed angle, which is 2 inputs. I'll choose the top of one and the top of the other, and I'll make them parallel to each other. Now they will rotate together. But if I want them to not rotate at all, I could come here and I could look and I could say, oh, that looks like maybe a 35 to 40 degree angle. And so I come in here, constrain, angle, directed angle, and then I choose the top of this face and the top of this face, and I can choose instead of 0, maybe I'll make this 35 degrees. Notice it rotated that way, which is good. If I have to hit negative 35 to rotate the other way, that would be fine, and 35 looked like it might work. I could change it to 40, whatever needed. Now, obviously these need to connect in somehow, so let's go ahead and handle that. So I'll do constrain. I take the screw and I want to put it into the screw head. So I take the end of the screw, but I want to go to insert because they're circular. So I get the circle and the axis in between. And then I want to insert the screw all the way to the end of that. I hit apply. Then I'm going to insert that surface to where it touches on here, which is right here. I hit apply, And then lastly, if you think about it, we don't know how far this one gets screwed in. So I'm just going to go to that surface, and I'll come around to this part of that one, and I'll hit OK. And you'll look, and those could still rotate, and that's perfectly fine. Now we want to bring in the wheel. So I'm going to hit place, and I'm going to go to my IKEA folder where I've downloaded the correct parts, of course, and I want to place the wheel into this assembly. So I go to my Inventor parts, and I go, notice there's a wheel part, but there's also a wheel, and this is the sub-assembly symbol. It's an assembly symbol, so it's 3 parts that are put together into what we call a sub-assembly. So when I bring it brings in all 3 parts. Now, I want to constrain this, and I want to insert this part of it right here to this face on the inside right here. Now notice, when I look, that is not lined up. I'd like that to be centered. So I can come over to the wheel and I can go to that constraint, or I could have done this while I made it. I can click on that and I can offset it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to edit that to show you where the offset is. It's right here. So if I hit 0.5 for my offset, it's way too far. So maybe 0.2. Ooh, that looks like it's probably pretty good. Let's leave it there. Now it's floating in space, which is not possible. So obviously we need to add some more constraints. So how about I do a constraint, and I do an insert constraint, and I go the inside of that black piece to the inside of that, and I hit OK. And notice that that now inserted itself into both of them, which makes sense. And then I do constrain, and I'm going to go ahead and insert again the inside of that piece to the inside of this face here. And now if you're having trouble selecting something, one thing you can do is you can hover for a second, and it will let you choose different opportunities, like different faces, and then you can choose the one that's appropriate. So choose that one. It looks like it went to the right spot. Ooh, not quite. So maybe we offset that by like 0.1. Oh, it went the wrong way, so we could do negative 0.1. And negative 0.1 will insert it the other way. That just depends on which one you chose first or which one you chose second would make it positive or negative. I hit OK, and now I've got a good start. One thing you're going to notice as you make your assembly is some things in real life might bend, but in here they won't. So you might need to fake an assembly by just getting something really close so that all it does is rotate, and then maybe you get it lined up as best you can, and then you just ground that part because you just want to get it lined up and as close as possible. But that should only be a last resort. That is all for this video, and if I figure out how to stop sharing my screen, I will.